Welcome to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, here to share some amazing conversations. We're talking business, health, making and saving money, or starting something epic. Think of this as your go-to spot for stories that do a lot more than just kill time. They spark ideas, give you a boost, and perhaps even change the way you look at the world. I'm pulling in the experts, the thinkers, the doers, and the dreamers. We're about to dive into stories that open doors and ideas that light up your brain. Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley. With me today is my guest, Dr. Amy Loden Tiffany. How are you today, Dr. Amy?
Well, great. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. I am honored to have you on the show. I'm looking forward to this conversation since we agreed to meet and do this. I can't wait for the listeners to learn more from you. You have some incredible information that you're going to be sharing with us today. So again, welcome. Let me just share a little bit about you so the listener has an idea of who you are, because you are incredibly well-rounded. You're an entrepreneur. You are an author. You are a TEDx speaker. Obviously a physician, Dr. Amy. You're a mother of 5, and you're really helping women in this concierge kind of practice that you've created to grow and be probably like the best selves, right? And I want to touch on your book, and we'll get more into the details as we go, but it's the Postpartum Pivot. And I know you've got a part 2 that's coming out, and we'll get into that as we go. But again, welcome, Dr. Amy. Thank you for coming on. Tell us how this journey happened for you.
I think I'm pretty much like every other woman out there. I thought things would happen one way, and my body said, that's not what we're doing, right? And it's a big surprise when things don't go the way you thought they were going to go, and you have to figure out, how do I change? What pivot do I make? Or do I want to be a victim and sit in this? I tend to be more of an action taker, and I thought, I can't live like this for the rest of my life. So what am I going to do? What is really where I started doing things differently? Probably where it starts the most would be when I realized that my kids were seeing me show up as a different person than my patients. My daughter at the time, my oldest, she was 7. At that point, we had 4 kids. So a 7, 5-year-old, and then 18-month-old twins. And my daughter came up to me one night when I was doing charts. I had about 3,000 patients, which is average for a primary care doctor in the United States. And I was doing charts every single night, all weekend long. It never stopped. And I didn't know my patients. I knew they were 15-minute visits in and out, and I was trying to remember details, and you just can't in that kind of time frame. If you don't write it down, it's gone. 20 to 30 patients a day. I mean, it was a pace that doesn't make sense. Yeah, we do it. I've been on the patient side of that experience too, and it sucks. So I really was like, I can't do this forever, but I'll do it for right now until my daughter comes downstairs one night, and I'm very annoyed. She won't go just up and watch the TV that, of course, now I'm using as a babysitter, the thing I vowed I'd never do, I'm doing. And she's like, are you buying my birthday gifts? No, I'm working like I do every night, right? And I snapped at her, and I didn't really think it was that much of a snap. It was just kind of, the mom irritability thing. And I said, go watch your TV, and then we're going to go to bed. And she didn't move. So I look up because I'm about ready to snap again. I can feel the anger bristling, right? Why are you not listening to me? And I'm horrified because standing in front of me in her little pink pajamas, her barefoot feet, her hair wet from the shower, my daughter has the most beautiful blue eyes, and there are just tears pooling in her eyes and streaming down her face. And she's not saying a word. She just looks at me. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? Right? And she says, Mommy, why do you love your job more than me? And that killed me. Because my entire career, I tried to be a good doctor. But the only thing I'd ever wanted more than that was to be a good mom. And I realized it was being neither in that moment. I was feeling both. I told my husband that night, listen, this isn't working anymore. I need to either be a stay-at-home mom, or I need to retire and do something different. And he's like, you can do something different, but you're not allowed to retire. I can't have you at home that much. He works from home. Like, okay, noted. I'm going to do something different. And June 1st this year will be our 5-year anniversary of doing something different.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Congratulations on recognizing and making that change that was the best for you and your family. That's incredible. And I know we had our own business. My kids came to the office with me. They did their homework at a table while I was working. And so I can absolutely, recognize that situation where you're trying to be the best of all of it all the time. And
Yes.
most moms are just trying to do their best all the time, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
As would I, but I realized in that moment that my best wasn't who I wanted to be. And we get to choose. Do we continue in this path or do we do something different? And different is scary. Different is hard, right? But am I being who I want to be? And if not, what am I going to do about it? So I took that leap. You would think from that moment that I knew immediately what path would be straight, right? And it's been a very crooked path the last 5 years. But about 6 months into that, I still hadn't learned my lesson. I had done much better in terms of having fewer patients, longer visits, really good connections. But I was essentially a workaholic. I was still putting in 70 to 80 hours a week. And mind you, this is unattending, not as a student or resident. Like I'm at the highest level and still doing this math. Like the math isn't mathing. But I wasn't thinking it that way until I literally worked myself into a hospital bed. One Saturday morning, I was like, my gosh, I just keep having this back pain, this belly pain, like something's wrong. I'm gonna go to urgent care, get some labs, whatever, I'll be fine. And urgent care sent me the emergency room. Emergency room admitted me. And I was in the hospital for several days because several organs were just not working right anymore. They were just like, we're done. And we're going to make you rest. There's a reason God gives us a Sabbath, is so that we rest. And I wasn't doing that. So that started a new journey of figuring out, all right, how can I also be the best version of me to myself? Because this is the only body I have. And if I am going to live an average woman's in her 80s, am I doing what it takes to get there in a good shape? Or am I literally shooting myself in the foot? And it was fascinating over the next 2 years how many times as I continued to start doing what I tell my patients to do, how my patients would reflect back to me, "Oh my gosh, you look amazing. What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm doing what I tell you to do," right? Like it actually works when I actually do what I tell other people to do. So there's a lot of camaraderie that our patients and we have, and it's nice to be able to be vulnerable with them and tell them, "Listen, I'm no different than you. I may know more and be a little bit more ahead of the journey on the book knowledge side, but the practical stuff is hard for everybody. It's always like, how do you do it? How do you get this done in the life you have? And as soon as you figure it out, something changes. It's true for me too. It's been an incredible, eye-opening experience as I've gone through the perimenopause is starting, right? And like, oh gosh, here we're going again. There's a new phase coming. I can see it. And you just keep learning and growing and things stop working and it's okay. And you're done for that part of your life. But most of my patients are women 30s to 60 roughly, and they'll tell me, I don't understand. I'm doing all the things, everything I've always done, everything that's recommended, and it's not working. Well, you're right. It's not. So we got to do something different if we want a different result.
Yeah, that's just tremendous, Dr. Amy. Thank you for sharing that with us. And it's so important to hear. Like, we know the things we need to do, but we have to implement those things, right? And the point you just made about you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting.
That's right.
And, that's something that I have tried to think about in my journey, not just of health wise, but I started running at 40 and I wanted to get faster and I wanted to see if I could do it. Never ran before. It was never my thing. But that was something that someone told me. If you don't change the way that you're running, the type of running that you're doing, you're going to get the same results. You want to get
Right.
faster, you got to do something different. Right.
Yes,
And so, again, it just applies everywhere in your life.
it does.
Yeah. So great things to think about. Thank you for sharing that. Would you say that this was the kind of breaking point for you when this was happening? That, you're trying to do it all, you're trying to have it all, but it wasn't fulfilling and it certainly wasn't good for you physically.
Mhm.
What do you want to share on that?
Yeah, I'd actually go back a little further for that first breaking point. And as you may see after you hear my story, I have multiple breaking points, right? And that's actually, I think, fairly normal for most people as you have multiple episodes of ups and downs. But I started my career in academic medicine. I trained at Cornell. Had always wanted to really be one of the most elite institutions, working there, training there. Thought I would be on the pathway to research and worked here in town at one of those similar type institutions and wonderful people. They do a lot of cool things. But by 5 years in, I was like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And I don't really want to be a tenured professor. So I need to do something different, right? I took my exit and already invested heavily in learning about menopausal medicine and integrating that in my internal medicine practice, but started doing training in lifestyle medicine and obesity medicine as well. And that was all kind of pre-COVID. Joined an OBGYN group, worked as the women's health internal medicine doc in their practice. While I was there, I unexpectedly got pregnant with twins. And nice surprise of our life. At that point, there's been more surprises since, but that was the big surprise. We had at that time a 4 and a 6-year-old, and pregnancy overall had gone fine until it wasn't. At 31 weeks pregnant, I started having a lot of symptoms that were concerning, and I went in to get checked. My blood pressure was over 200, which is never good anytime, but it's not good in pregnancy for sure. That will get the OBGYNs anxious every time. And they're like, "You're not going home. I'm 31 pregnant. I have 4 to 6-year-old home." I'm like, "And I have a business," right? I'm like, "What do you mean I'm going home? Tell me what you want me to do. I'm a reliable person. I'll do it. I'll check in. Like, it'll be fine." And I'm like, "No, no, no. You're not going home because you may need an emergency C-section at any point." I'm like, "No, no, no." Ultimately, they won, and I was admitted. And I spent the next 4 days dealing with, they hook you up to the stupid monitors for the baby, and then the baby moves, and they have to redo the monitor and back and forth all day long, right? "Oh my gosh, I can't do this." They're like, "You're gonna stay here till 34 weeks, and then we'll see." I'm like, "That's 3 weeks away. I can't manage 3 days. Like, this isn't working." Well, God in his wisdom knew that I couldn't manage 3 weeks. And so he, really allowed it to become very quickly apparent to all of us that my body was not gonna tolerate this. So within 3 days, I couldn't walk across my hospital room without having severe shortness of breath. I couldn't complete a sentence without severe shortness of breath. I called my mom and my sister, and in my head, I'm fine. Like, during this episode, I'm like, "Fine, I'm just gonna wait this. I'm tough. I've got this," right? And I learned later that my mom and my sister are looking at each other. They've muted themselves while they're listening to me talk, and they're like, "We have to go to St. Louis. We have to get to her. This is really bad." The next day, my mom comes in. I'm like, "Why'd you come? Like, it's fine, and they're not coming yet." And she's like, "I just really felt like I had to be here." Like, okay. The breathing's getting worse. I'm fighting with the OBs every time they're like, "We need to go to the operating room." I'm like, "No, I'm fine. Just give me some medicine. I'll be fine." Right. Finally, one of the doctors who's a high risk OB, and I had worked with her at that institution before I left for 5 years. I knew her well. I respected her. And she's like, "Listen, you've got 2 choices. Your lungs are filling with fluid. You're drowning. So you've got 2 options here. You can continue the road you're on, and you will end up with an emergency C-section, but you will be intubated, and you will be on machine breathing for you. And I don't know how long it'll take to get you off that. That's option number 1. Option number 2 is you can start listening to me and stop being your own doctor and go to the operating room tonight and then go see your babies." And when you put it like that, I'm like, "All right, fine. You win. I'll do it." And then I spiraled. That spiral that night was what was the worst part, because I remember laying on my back in the bed as they're wheeling me to the operating room and seeing the hospital lights go by overhead, right? And all I can think of is, "I've killed my kids. I've killed my kids. I've killed my kids." And it didn't help that when they pulled them out, I'm like, "Please let me see them." So they lower the curtain as they're pulling out. They literally pulled them out at the same time. How often do you hear twins being pulled out at the same time, right? They have 2 separate pediatric teams, 2 OBs. They're pulling the baby out, and they very quickly, they're like, "Pull the curtain down, let her see," and then it was gone. But in those few seconds, I saw the babies were blue. They're not supposed to be blue when they come out. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I've killed my babies," right? And so I sent my mom with 1 baby, my husband with the other baby, so I'm in the hospital room alone after the surgery, and the nurses are checking on me and everything, but I'm, like, so far down this deep hole. How could I have done this? How could I have been so sick? How could I have been so stupid? And just the self-flagellation, right? And I think at different times in our lives, we're all there. But I prayed, say, "God, if you will just let them live, I will do whatever you want me to," right? To be a good mom to them and to be a better mom and to them. And I have not done that perfectly, but I do think that it has had an impact on how I show up as a parent, much differently than I had on my older kids. And thankfully now my older kids are getting that same treatment, right? But those little boys spent 11 weeks in the NICU. There was a lot of ups and downs. Today they're 110% testosterone 110% of the time. Like they will jump off the top of the couch just to see if gravity still works, right? They climb upside down, not just you've got the play set, right, with the swings and the slide and everything. That's too easy. So they're actually climbing up backwards and upside down the support system of the play set, because that would be like what no other child would do, right? So I'm convinced these guys are like little warriors, and they're gonna be like going to NASA and doing crazy things that involve way more adrenaline than I can tolerate. But it didn't start that way. And yet I had to go through that, number 1, so that my suffering, I would understand better what other people went through. And number 2 being I needed to change. It wasn't enough to say it in words. It had to happen in actions and deeds as well. And again, not perfect. by far. You can ask any one of my kids and they'll be like, yeah, she's not perfect, but it's better. So that's what spurred me to be like, how can I get this message to other women? How can I get this? That's what the TEDx is about. That's what the book is about. Like, how do we be this better version? How do we do things differently when we know the healthcare system is not focused on health, but on sickness? How do we take advantage of these signs our pregnancies give us? So pregnancy, any induced hypertension, gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, which is what I had, all of those predict early heart disease. In the case of diabetes, well, diabetes, you would think that our system has this set up since we know this to actually intervene. We don't do a good job of it. It's not systematically something that's happening well. And on top of that, most moms who have 4, 6, 8, 10, 12-week-old babies aren't coming to their visits. You would think they would, and a lot of people do, but it's not the majority. So if the majority of moms aren't coming, and we know that these moms who already have these high risks are at risk for other things early, let's do something different. And that's what I built my practice around. Same thing with perimenopause, especially hot flashes. Like, those are risk signs for early heart disease. Are we going to just sit there with this risk, or are we going to do something about it? And the beautiful thing is we can do something in the United States. We do have the leverage and the things to do. But to your point earlier, it's hard to know how, right? How do you figure out your exercise and your diet and your sleep when you got a newborn, or when you have 2 kids or 4 or whatever, and a job, the one you get paid for, but also the one at home you don't get paid for, right? So there's all these different iterations, and we have to personalize it. We can't just keep applying standards and getting nowhere. We have to start looking at women as individuals, saying, where in your life do you need help? Where can we optimize this for you? What doesn't work that used to work, and how do we make a new thing work? And that takes a ton of time. It does not work in the traditional system.
Oh gosh, Dr. Amy, thank you for sharing all of that with us. There's so much in there that you shared that really I hope the listeners maybe rewind and listen again, because you've made some incredible points and things that I didn't even know, like the point about the hot flashes, being an indicator for early heart disease. And it's like, now I'm going, maybe I need to be checked out a little bit more thoroughly because of the hot flashes I
Yes.
experienced. And, what could that mean for me and my health going forward? I mean, there was so much in there, and really, like listening to the people who have our best interests at heart, the doctors who were telling you, and, even though you're a doctor as well, it's like you're thinking it from a different point than
Right.
they are. Right. And so
Correct.
let's just listen to the people who are really trying to take the best care of us and follow their advice, instead of like, "Oh, no, no, it's fine. I know what to do. I know how to handle it," let time out for a second. Let's
Yeah.
set that aside and listen to what I'm really speaking to you, and hear what I'm saying. So such good advice in there. So thank you for all of that.
Yeah.
Would you say now, like, was it the, fears of these things that you had to face that really were the point of the pivot for you?
The point of the pivot for me was twofold. One is I wanted to be an example of what was possible for other moms, for other doctors, for other leaders. I I could see that what the healthcare system is and has been wasn't working. And the second part is I just really felt like there was a better way. Even had I stayed in the system, I just felt like most of the people I knew, most of my colleagues, I'm just going to pick on physicians only. There's a lot of different people on the healthcare team. Okay. Physicians are trained in a way that is unlike any other academic training. It's both hierarchical, like the military. So you don't say anything if you're not a certain rank. And then once you are that rank, you expect people to follow that. But it's also very snobby in the sense that we are the experts, right? We are the ones that spent more than a decade training. We are this, that, and the other. And that gets in the way, I think, a lot for many people. And it's gotten a lot worse in the last 6, 7 years. Do I think that that's because of COVID? I don't think it's because of it, but I think COVID unmasked it.
Mhm.
I think that it was there and that people already had some distrust forming. And then there were a series of really bad decisions that affected mass populations. And now there's a lot of questioning. Should I get the vaccine? Should I not? Was I wrong to get it, or should I have done it? And you can beat yourself up with those questions. For me, it's about how do I move forward now, knowing that information. If I had known now right? Like what I know now, if I had known that when I was first treating patients, when this all came down in March of 2020, would I have made the same decisions? Of course not. But it was all the information I was given at the time. And sometimes you do have to make decisions with really crappy information. And later you learn that, gee, that isn't the decision I wish I would have made or the advice I would have given. And I think it's really important as physicians, if we're going to be leaders in healthcare, to say, that just didn't happen well. It was really messy and people got hurt. And how can we prevent it from happening again like that? What can we do differently? What can we learn? Because we can't undo. But what can we learn to make this better? And I wanted to be part of that wave of physicians who said, we can make the future better, but I'm not going to stay in a hierarchical system that's judging and criticizing me when I'm questioning it. And I get to ask questions too, right? Like I am a scientist, I am a physician, I have been educated. So I can look at the same literature and say, is that really the result that we're going to tell people? I've always been a little bit rebellious. So that part isn't totally unlike me. But it is really hard for physicians in general to break free because that is the mindset they've been trained in. And by the time you get done training, you've spent at least 7 to 12 years in that type of mindset where you're being beat down and you're taught not to question and just do what everyone says. So we've created a generation and a culture of little physician widgets. And I don't want to be a widget, right? I'm okay being told that I'm rebellious and that I'm not doing what everyone else is doing if I'm helping my patient and if there's not evidence of harm in what I'm doing. I'm not suggesting we go harm people, but I am suggesting we stop and think and say, does this make sense for this patient? And if it doesn't, then why are we doing it?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point to think about for sure. And I had no idea the structure of the system. Obviously, I'm not in the medical profession at all. So I wouldn't know that it's, kind of hierarchical like that
Mhm.
and snobbish, which I think is kind
Yes.
of hilarious that you say that. But I could kind of see that because when you get to those elite levels, it's kind of like, I know so much more
Right.
than everybody else.
Yes.
That could kind of mentally put you in a position where you think you are better than everyone. So I can see that. But, not meaning that it's actually true,
Correct.
but
Well, it's not
anyway.
true. Let's be clear. It's not true, right? Like we're all humans. I believe we're all created in the image of God. We're all equal. And to be coming across like that now in retrospect, as I look at that, I'm like, this is asinine. Like, why
Mm,
did we think this was okay?
mm,
So I'm totally comfortable tearing down the system as it is in those terms. And, like I said, I trained at Cornell, like one of the best institutions in the world. Does that make me any better than my patient? No. And at the end of our life, when we're dying, it's not going to matter between me and anyone else where I went to school or how I was trained, right? I mean, who did I love? Who loves me? It's not my job holding my hand. It's hopefully going to be my husband, my kids, my family, my loved one. And I think that's what most people want. So if that's what we want, how do we reverse engineer that? How do we recreate it in a system that's not pushing us toward that direction?
yeah. Another great thing to think about for sure, we are all the same in that respect. We're born, we live, we die.
Correct.
So
Right. So how
it
do we
doesn't
move
matter
on?
what job you had,
That's
what
right.
school you went to, what house you have, what cars you drive. None of that matters. It's
Right.
who you are in the world and with people. And,
Right.
I love that you're sharing. Yeah,
Absolutely.
great point. Oh my gosh. Okay, so can we pivot in our conversation and talk a
Nice
little bit
word.
about how that physical burnout that,
Yeah.
quote unquote successful women are
Mhm.
feeling and women in general, because we're always trying to balance so many things in our lives. It's
Yep.
jobs, it's families, it's whatever. So what do you want to share on that?
So that's the majority of our clientele. That's really who we serve is, and I wasn't joking earlier. We literally work all day in our full-time job and we come home and then we do our second full-time job that we're not paid for, right? Sometimes it's kids, sometimes it's parents, sometimes it's just someone else that you're caring for and the housework and the grocery shopping. And even if you have help, it's still disproportionately women, regardless of education level, ethnicity, age, it disproportionately affects women. And so when we're working with our clients, one of the things that we try to figure out is what is the life you have and what is the life you wished was different in a year? That's realistic. Like, would we all wish that we were Elon Musk rich? Of course, everyone does. Just joking. Probably some people don't. But point being, like, let's be realistic. And within that realistic frame, what would next year look like if you could wave your magic wand and have it be different? So I really try to get patients to paint me a vision of what's different, not just in their health, but in their mindset and their life. I find that it's really helpful to me to be able to help them accountability, motivation, it all connects to our why. So understanding that, and then what we start to drill down on is, what are your values? What's important to you? Um, for me, I've learned that my faith, my family, my fitness are kind of my top three. I don't do them perfectly all the time. And there are seasons of life where one is dominant and the other aren't. But if an opportunity or an obstacle isn't aligned in a way that helps me with one of those three areas, I need to let it go. And I need to say no. I should say I get to say no because it's not aligned with where I want to be, right? And so understanding your values, I think, is one of the most powerful things women can do. I wish we taught it to students so that they understood the decisions they were making because we all have them. We just don't always articulate them. Many people aren't even trained to understand them. I really like what Brene Brown has done in her list of values. It's a free online worksheet you can look at. I had my middle school daughter do it last fall and say, just let's narrow this down to what are your top three so you can figure out. And hers are different than mine. They should be, right? And once you know your values, you make your decisions from those values. And most women who are working outside the home, but also for women inside the home, they're making the decisions they are because they want to have an impact on somebody. Sometimes it's the kids if they're a stay-at-home mom, right? Or sometimes it's the boardroom if they're working for a company, but they're wanting to have an impact. By definition, impact requires collision, right? It's not just go out and make the world better. It's collide with something. It's to express your actions or your thoughts and your words in a way that change what the status quo was. So when you understand the impact you want to have, so for me, that was how do I be an example of what is possible and how do I show up in a different way for my kids? So knowing that was my impact I was going for made it a lot easier to make decisions. Do I want this, that, and the other in my business? Yes, yes, no, because that's aligned or isn't aligned, right? So now I've got a really easy filter for understanding how do I make decisions. And even when I feel a little bit like, oh, I should do that thing, no, no, you shouldn't, because it's not aligned with your values. So we teach people how to say no and not feel guilty and have confidence that they have their own back in terms of building toward their values. And then we teach them to prioritize. Generally, I find people are familiar with the concept of time management, and they'll tell me I just need better time management. Yeah, I look at them, and these are successful CEOs or they're CEO of their house, right? And I'm looking at them, and I'm always a little bit stunned when they say it because I'm thinking to myself, you do not have a problem with time management. Like, you would not have the life you have if you had a problem with time management. But you do have a very big problem with priority management. And if we don't fix your priorities, if we don't align them with your values and the impact you want to have, you're not going to have different results. So that's a very abbreviated version of what we do over an entire year. But we figure out using that filter of BIP, what are my values? What's the impact I want to have? How do I prioritize in a way to facilitate those? We can actually start to see people's lives radically change. And it's every single week I hear somebody say, thank you so much. My life is so much different than it was a year ago. And of course, they still want more to go. I still want more to go, right? But you can't get to the more to go until you've taken the first steps to get going. And that's really hard to do by yourself. So that's why it's always, in my experience, better to have a partner. Even knowing that as myself, I've hired coaches for decades because it's like, I can't get there myself. I need help. We do that in academics. We do that in athletics. Why in the world would we not do it in the rest of our life? Have someone tell me what my blind spots are. Some of my biggest business breakthroughs are because I said something and a coach asked me, is that true? Like what you just said, is that true? I'm like, oh, well, I guess it's true because that's what I've always seen and known. And oh, wow, no, actually, you know what? That doesn't have to be true. And that's pausing and reflection you can't see by yourself most of the time. So I don't think that's really what you asked me, but my menopause brain went there. So there you go.
You know what? That's okay. I love it. Dr. Amy, that was so good. And it echoes so many of the conversations I have on this podcast. It's what is most important to you? What do you value? And that needs to be the thing that you're focusing on, right? So you're removing everything that is not in that value aligned thing that you want to do, right? Or what's most important in your life so that all the rest of it can just fall away and you can say no and not feel guilty because you know this thing that you're being asked to do doesn't align with your values and what's important in the impact you want to have. And so I love your VIP values, impact, and priorities, because then, yes, you can make those, priority list of things because you know the value, you know the impact you're going to have by sticking to that. And so, yeah, it's beautiful. I love it. And thank you for sharing it in that way.
You're welcome. And, I'll just tag one thing on. We talked about death earlier. As a physician, one of the saddest things I do is when I realize I have to tell someone they have a terminal illness, be it cancer or something else. And unfortunately, that tends to happen a lot to people who've just retired and they've worked their whole life. And suddenly I'm telling them, hey, you got pancreatic cancer, you've got esophageal cancer, you got ovarian cancer, whatever. And you're left in a position where, like, I spent my whole life working for the retirement and I don't have it now, right? You see it vanishing before their eyes. And I want to say she was from Australia. I may have the country wrong, but there was a hospice nurse who wrote down the most common regrets of the dying, the top 5 regrets of the dying. And I constantly think, how do I avoid experiencing that? And I don't have them memorized, but one of them was, I let other people decide what was important in my life rather than going after what was important to me. And let other people make me in a position where I wasn't happy and I wasn't letting myself be happy, I think is how it's worded. And I just encourage your listeners to Google that, the 5 regrets of the dying. There's a book on it, but it at least lists out each one so you can see what they are. And I think that's very powerful because, again, reverse engineering, right? When I'm on my deathbed, I hope I make it to 80, like that's the average age of woman for the United States. Hopefully it'll be 90 or higher by the time I get there. But, I don't want to be in a nursing home in a wheelchair and not have my memory and not know who's around me and not have that kind of experience, right? I want to be able to be independent and functional and have all of my family with me and to remember why these people are important to me. To really know the impact it had on the world before I leave it. And both of those outcomes are possible, but they are mutually exclusive. You do choose one or the other. And ultimately, that comes down to your habits and your mindset. Again, things we're not taught in school. We should be because they're such big life skills.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm familiar with it as well, but I don't recall the name of the author. Yeah. But I have seen that before, the regrets of the dying. And you're absolutely right. We can use this to reverse engineer our life and the choices that we're making and the decisions, the directions that we go to get us to where we want to be, right? It's like, I don't want to be there. So I got to make some different choices so that I can be over here where I want to be. And I know that's like very simplistic way to think about it, but it is really that simple. We're just making different choices is going to give us different answers and different solutions, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I think that's a great thing to think about and remember and begin to look at in your own life. Like, what are these choices that I'm making that aren't going to get me where I want to go?
Right.
So, yeah. I think that's awesome. Okay, so let's talk about your TEDx talk because I want to hear more about this. I want the listeners to hear more. And then we'll dive into your book, The Postpartum Pivot. And I want to hear more about the upcoming book, which you shared briefly is going to be about perimenopause and menopause. So take it away.
Exactly. So the TEDx was born out of my frustration with the US healthcare system. I knew from my experience, but then also my training, so personally and professionally, that if a woman has gestational diabetes, within about 5 years, half of those women go on to develop type 2 diabetes. So when we tell moms, hey, you have a higher risk of diabetes later, we're not really being clear with them or fair to them because we're not telling them half the women are going to have it within 5 years. It becomes this kind of long-term might happen, I'm not worried about it today thought. When in fact, the pregnancy has unmasked that insulin resistance is present and that aggressive intervention is needed immediately. Not only that, the pregnancy environment that had gestational diabetes, that baby, as they grow up, much higher risk for diabetes as an adult. It's not a benign thing for the justifies mom. And that's really how it was posed to us in medical school as these are pregnancy-related problems. You make the pregnancy go away, the problem goes away. And that's a lie. That is not true. But that is still how most students and doctors are taught. It is absolutely unmasking what was already there. It didn't cause it. It just showed us what was there. So we need to think of it as a gift. So first one was gestational diabetes. Second one, because of my own experience with preeclampsia, as I started researching, and I was horrified to find that women who'd had gestational hypertension or preeclampsia who don't get good treatment to reverse that, 4 times higher chance than the average woman for dying before the age of 60 from cardiovascular disease. In our world, cardiovascular disease includes stroke, it includes heart attack, it includes heart failure, blood vessel disease. It's a really big deal. And not just in the United States, but globally, more than half of all women are going to die from cardiovascular disease. So that means every woman I hear, they're like, I'm worried about breast cancer, 1 in 8 chances for most people, 1 in 2 chance for cardiovascular disease. That means one of us is going to have it. And we already know I had the risk, so it's going to be me, right? Like, that's how serious this is. And women don't realize that. So there's a disproportionate amount of fear on some of the medications that can be given to help prevent that. But I don't even have to go there. I can get people better, which is lifestyle, if I teach them the right things. But they're not going to get there with one visit. It's going to be, a process of several months to years to undo what's there. So those were the 2 things that I realized from my own history. I was like, this is really bad. And they're not hearing it from healthcare systems. So what other venue? I could do social media, sure, but what other major venues out there? Well, it's the TEDx, right? And I was like, I need to do a TEDx talk. I need to tell women what their risk is. I want them to realize how big of a problem this is. In 2022, the CDC said there was 70,000 women who'd had preeclampsia, just preeclampsia, in 1 year, globally, okay? These 70,000 women didn't just have it, though, they died from it. So there's a whole lot more women who didn't die from preeclampsia who've had it. And those numbers are startling because that means they're recurring year after year after year. And nobody's doing anything about it. So there's this black hole. We're literally dumping women who've had babies into this black hole and being like, bye, good luck. You're right. We'll see you for your next blood test. Either not getting any of the interventions that they should be at their family medicine or internal medicine doctor because it takes 17 years for the data to become clinical practice. So the doctor they're seeing doesn't realize that 17 years ago, like this big study came out that we should be screening differently. So they're not screening differently. We just had a major study come out in the New England Journal about 3 years ago with certain risks in cholesterol profiles that we can very easily test for that aren't expensive, but it hasn't even made it into clinical practice yet. We started doing it right away, but we have that luxury, right? Because I've tailored the practice differently. And so women don't realize what they don't know. None of us do, right? We don't know our blind spots, but this is a major place that we can intervene and literally change not just women's outcomes, but their children's outcomes. So the TEDx really focuses on that and raising awareness of any woman who's had a pregnancy complicated by blood pressure or glucose. If you remember nothing else from what I'm going to say, that woman has a higher risk for a long-term glucose or blood pressure problem very quickly. The good news is when it comes to blood pressure, specifically blood pressure in pregnancy, if we can get their blood pressure back to normal within 10 years, get them off meds, get their blood pressure normal, keep it normal, their risk goes back to the average woman's risk. That's fantastic news. And I don't have to take medicine to do it. I have to work with mindset. I work with habits. I have to work with accountability and build something into their life that makes sense to them. And they're the expert in their life. So they've got to be involved and engaged. But we can do it. And then they do it at their house. They change it for their children. Now we've got a ripple impact, right? Their children are going to school and raising questions, and now it's rippling more. And when you can have that type of ripple impact, that's a legacy. That's what I want to do. So that's the TEDx talk.
Oh my gosh, amazing. I will link that in the show notes because I want the listeners to check that out. And sounds like incredible information, life-saving information that you're sharing there. Things I had no idea about, obviously because I am a typical person going in just once a year, having labs maybe once a year now, it's like no clue on any of this. So yeah, I absolutely want to get that out. And so thank you for doing that
Absolutely.
for all of us.
Yes.
And then do you want to share now the Postpartum Pivot, which is your international best-selling book?
Yes.
And
shocked me.
yes.
But the idea is, just like we've been talking about, it is really hard to figure out the how. I can tell someone you need to lose weight, right? I can tell someone you need your glucose down, your liver enzymes, your kidneys, whatever. But they walk out of my office and they're like, okay, that's great. How am I going to do this? How do I make this work? And so I wanted something that women could use at any point postpartum, because we think of postpartum as being like the first 6 months to a year after a baby, right? The truth is, once you've had a baby, you're postpartum forever. So it really was this idea of there's postpartum, and it kind of edges into hormone changes that start with perimenopause. And that is what the sequel will be about, is how do we do this perimenopause? We're not having babies anymore, but we really want to kill our boss or our better half or our children because our hormones are all over the place, right? And we're doing all the things, and we still are wearing a tire around our belly that's never been there before. We don't have our energy, our joints hurt, all the things, and you're just like for the love of my sanity, can something just work right today? Right?
Mhm.
And maybe that does mean hormones. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it has nothing to do with your hormones, but you still need to have check it, get checked out and figure out what is going on. And there is just so much that has come out in the last 15 years that I find encouraging, that we can take better care of women, whether they're postpartum or menopause. But we have to help them with the how. It's not enough to just say, this is the risk. It's how do we mitigate that risk and how do we come alongside you? And I know I can't do that to everybody all over the world. So I was like, how can I get this information out there? I know, I'll write a book and let me be super vulnerable in this book and be really honest about how it's been hard for me as a mom and what does it look like to have a lot of kids and a job and how messy it is, because I find that when we're really honest with others, we learn from each other and we grow from each other. And that's what I wanted to give. So it was really a labor of love. And that's why, if people contact my office for a physical copy of the book, we'll charge nothing for the book. We ask them to pay, I think, $5 for shipping and handling, but we'll send it to them because I want people to have this information. And the part two, hopefully it'll be out in the next few months, and we'll go into how do we do this more tailored, right, for perimenopause without all the rage and all the things that we talk about. So that's where we're going. Exciting times ahead. I had planned to work on it this year, but I had mentioned earlier that the twins were the surprise of my life up until that point. Last August, God gave a beautiful 2-month baby to us to foster and wasn't expecting that. Had about 3 weeks notice and suddenly realizing foster home. So she's 9 months now. I don't know where this is going. We're open to adopting her if that's what's best for her. But it certainly has been another surprise in my life. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so sleep deprived, right? Like all the things. And my sister is like making fun of me. She's like, you're such an idiot. Why are you not reading your book? Oh, you're right. I'm postpartum again, right? Like I'm in that first year of having the baby where you're just trying to survive. I was like, I'm so tired getting up every night. And it doesn't matter if I birthed her or not, I'm still her main caregiver, right? And so what does that look like? And my sister's like, you need to go read your book. I'm going to send it to you. Do not do that. I'll not be able to recover from my humiliation if you do that. But I will remind myself of what I said. So good times.
Oh my gosh. So good. Congratulations on the books and, really, again, sharing vital information for women, for their health, the how you make the changes, the what you need to do. It's imperative that we know that because you're right.
Yes.
It's just like, yeah, it's great to know that the thing, but how do I fix the thing? Give me
Mhm.
some tools, some
Yes.
ways that I can make changes. And you're doing that. And so again, bravo. Thank you for that. And congratulations on the baby.
Thanks.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Another like kind of boom, bombshell,
Mhm. Yeah.
change in your life. But,
Yes.
what an incredible position to be in that you can do that for
Correct.
this child. And that's amazing. And yeah, a miracle of things to happen
Mhm.
is that,
Right.
it's you.
Yes.
So yeah, love it. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, we are so running out of time, but I really want to have you share with us if there is any books or podcasts that you think have been
Mhm.
helpful or beneficial that the listeners should check out. And I know you've just launched a podcast, which is
Mhm.
The Authentic Physician.
Yeah.
So take it away and share what you'd
Sure.
like.
If you've ever wanted to know what doctors talk about when they're on their own, go listen to the podcast because I never know where we're going with these conversations. And I've learned things that I had never even knew existed from these other doctors. So I interview female physicians who are entrepreneurial, who are outside the system, who are doing their own thing because they got fed up with the system. Actually a whole lot of us in the world. I had no idea. But getting to listen to those conversations, each one comes from a different perspective. Even if the same specialty, they have different insights. And so really, I'd encourage everyone to check that out. The second part of what you asked is about books and podcasts. Based on what we've talked about today, I think if someone hasn't read James Clear Atomic Habits, that would absolutely be the investment I would make. That is just a phenomenal book. That one of the things he says that I quote him on all the time is when life is tough, when things are hard, you do not rise to the level of your expectations and hopes. You fall to the level of your systems. And most of us haven't been trained to create systems. And so our life feels chaotic and messy and ugly because it is, right? But it doesn't have to stay that way. And so, I think that would be a really great read. The other thing I've been reading lately that's I think about boundaries a lot. I think about saying no. And one of the things I'm in a Bible study where we've been studying Nehemiah. Not exactly the Old Testament prophet you would think to go look at, but one of the things I've learned out of that is we have to have boundaries. We have to set expectations. We have to hold people accountable when they do harmful things. And I have found that to be so empowering, and also give people credit when they do really good things, right? Like, give them those kudos and step into that. But I have found it to be helpful in protecting the things that matter to me, my faith, my family, my fitness. And so those would be definitely things I'd encourage. I'm kind of fangirling the Diary of a CEO podcast right now. There was a really good interview he recently did with several women physicians who specialize in menopause and perimenopausal care. And I enjoyed that episode. He's done several others. And I think he's just a fascinating person because he interviews the most interesting people in topics you don't even see coming. So that's probably my most recent fangirling podcast that I would share. I'd love to read and I love to learn. And so I'm constantly looking for new books and recommendations as well.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you for those suggestions. James Clear has the Atomic Habits has been suggested by so many guests on the show. I've read it as well, and it is phenomenal. I mean, the things that you can learn and ways that you can stack your habits and
Yes.
just make those systems to make your life easier, to get the things done you need to do. It's tremendous. Yeah, absolutely.
It
Totally
is.
agree.
The other one
And
that's really good, sorry to interrupt you, is it's by a Navy SEAL and it's called Extreme Ownership. And it really can ruffle your feathers the wrong way because they basically are saying everything in your life is your fault. And so if you take credit for everything in your life, if you take blame for everything in your life, then you create a new life that you want. It's a little edgy, not for everybody, but really fascinating thought to read.
yeah, great suggestion. Thank you for that. I'll detail all of the books and podcast recommendations, and of course, your podcast as well, Authentic Physician. I will include that. I'm going to hit subscribe because I want to start listening and hear these conversations that you're having. It sounds amazing. So thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you for coming on the show, Dr. Amy. This has
You're
been
welcome.
so great. The information that you've shared, I think, is tremendous and can be life-saving for the listeners if they begin to examine themselves, talk to their doctors, and demand the care that they deserve. And so, yeah, thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much.
You're welcome. And if they're not getting that care, recognize that they need to go look for someone else. The Menopause Society has a great list of everyone who's certified in medicine for this. So there's resources out there if you keep looking.
Yeah, great suggestion. Thank you. I'll include that as well to make it easy for the listeners to find because I didn't even know that was a thing. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Again, Dr. Amy, this has been so amazing. Your knowledge, the information that you've shared has been fantastic. I so appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we'll talk more soon.
Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.